So in 2023, there were nearly 5,800 minors employed in direct violation of child labor laws here in the U.S.
Which is just, an incredibly massive number.
Right. It's a 283% increase since 2015.
Yeah, you look back over the last decade and the number of violations has literally multiplied fivefold.
And, a statistic like that usually makes people picture like a black and white photograph from the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly, like kids covered in soot next to a loom or something.
Yeah, but we are talking about right now. We are talking about you.
We're talking about a 15-year-old running a commercial fryer at a fast food franchise right down the street.
Or, a teenager launching a YouTube channel from their bedroom. Or someone just flipping thrift store finds online.
Because there is this massive, completely hidden web of rules dictating what you are actually allowed to do.
Right, and when you can do it. And maybe most importantly, who actually owns the money you generate?
The stakes here are incredibly high, honestly, because ignorance of this legal web doesn't offer you any protection.
It really doesn't.
Like, if you don't understand the mechanisms that govern youth employment, you are leaving yourself so vulnerable.
Vulnerable to a physical danger on a job site, for sure.
Yeah, physical danger, financial exploitation, and severe penalties from the IRS.
Which nobody wants. So that's our mission for this deep dive.
We are looking at a landscape that dictates the safety of your daily life and the security of your digital footprint.
And the rules are currently shifting, like faster than they have in a century.
They really are.
So that shift is what makes this so critical. We went through a massive stack of legal briefs, Labor Department fact sheets, tax guides, all of it.
To really map this out for you.
Yeah, because you have to look at the baseline rulebook first, just to understand how a teenager even ends up in a dangerous situation today.
And that rulebook is essentially, it's like two different referees blowing their whistles at the exact same time.
The federal government and the state government.
Right. You have the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the FLSA, sitting at the federal level.
And that dates all the way back to 1938.
Which is vital context, honestly. The 1938 origin matters.
Because it was born during the Great Depression, right?
Exactly. It was specifically designed to address what the legislation literally called oppressive child labor.
Oppressive child labor, wow.
Yeah, the federal government stepped in to establish a universal floor for the entire country.
Like a baseline for minimum wage, overtime pay, and youth employment standards.
Right, because they needed to physically pull children out of coal mines and factories and, put them into schools.
Which makes sense for 1938. But the modern application of this law is, well, it's highly complex.
It's a mess, frankly, because states have their own labor departments now.
And their own legislatures and their own totally different economic pressures.
Which creates a massive collision course between the state and federal levels.
Okay, so our sources emphasize this concept that we can call like the golden rule of labor laws.
I like that framing, the golden rule.
Yeah, which is basically when the federal law and the state law differ, the rule that provides the most protection to the minor always wins. Always.
So how does that actually play out in, a real-world scheduling scenario?
Well, think of it as a structural floor and ceiling.
Okay.
The federal government builds the floor. States are entirely free to build a higher ceiling of protection.
Like adding more rules to keep you safe.
Right, but they cannot dig a basement below the federal floor.
Give me an example of that.
So if you are 15, the federal FLSA dictates you cannot work past 7 p.m. on a school night.
Okay, pretty strict.
Very. Now, if your state passes a law saying 15-year-olds can work until 10 p.m.
Which some might want to do.
Yeah, but that state law is invalid in practice.
Oh, because it digs a basement.
Exactly. The federal regulation supersedes it, and you legally must clock out at 7 p.m.
Okay, so the federal floor is entirely segmented by age brackets.
It is.
Let's look at the mechanisms of these brackets, starting at the very bottom.
Right, so if you are under 14...
If you're under 14, you are essentially locked out of the formal W-2 workforce.
Completely. You cannot be hired by a standard corporation. There are a few narrow carve-outs, right?
Yeah, like acting, delivering newspapers directly to consumers, or, casual babysitting in a private home.
But traditional employment, like bagging groceries, is totally off the table.
Because the policy assumption is that a 13-year-old's exclusive occupation should just be their education and development.
Right. But then, the moment a person turns 14, the system sort of cracks the door open.
It does, though it is by far the most heavily regulated bracket in the American economy.
Yeah, for 14 and 15-year-olds, the constraints are severe.
During the school year, federal law caps you at 3 hours of work on a school day.
Just 3 hours.
And only 18 hours in an entire school week.
Plus there's that strict 7 p.m. curfew we mentioned earlier.
Right, which only extends to 9 p.m. between June 1st and Labor Day, when school is out.
Okay, let's unpack this. I look at that 14 to 15 bracket, and it feels like the government is keeping you on a very, very tight leash.
They absolutely are.
But then you turn 16. And the moment you hit that birthday, it's like the federal rules just evaporate.
It's a massive shift.
It's a cliff. According to the FLSA, all hour and time of day restrictions just vanish for 16 and 17-year-olds.
Federally speaking, yes.
I mean, you could legally be scheduled for a graveyard shift on a Tuesday night before a chemistry final.
Which is wild to think about.
Why does the federal government suddenly treat a 16-year-old like a full-blown adult when it comes to hours?
It's a really fascinating pivot. You have to look at the architectural philosophy of the 1930s legislation.
Okay, take us back.
So back then, by 16, individuals were genuinely entering young adulthood.
Right, historically speaking.
Yeah, many were leaving school to support their families full-time, or they were, preparing for the military.
Wow, okay.
So the federal government intentionally removes the scheduling guardrails at 16.
Shifting the responsibility away from Washington.
Exactly. They shift it entirely to the parents, the local school districts, or the state legislatures to regulate the teenager's time.
They basically assume the family unit will intervene if a teenager is, working overnight.
Right.
It's like they hand you the keys to the car and let the states set up the bumper lanes.
That's a great analogy. And then at 18, obviously, you age out of child labor protections entirely.
But wait, I want to push back on the 16-year-old bracket for a second.
Sure.
The federal government might remove the scheduling restrictions, but they definitely don't let you do just any job, right?
Oh, absolutely not. That is a crucial distinction.
There is a massive physical safety net that still remains in place.
Right, because the FLSA separates hours from hazards.
Okay.
You might be able to work a 40-hour week at 16, but the Secretary of Labor maintains this really strict list of 17 hazardous occupations.
The HOs.
Yes, the HOs. And these are completely prohibited for anyone under 18, regardless of how many hours they work.
And some of these HOs are incredibly obvious.
Like roofing operations.
Yeah, roofing, excavation, logging, working with explosives or radioactive materials.
I mean, nobody expects a 16-year-old to be carrying dynamite.
Exactly. The real danger, though, seems to lurk in totally mundane environments.
The everyday workplaces.
Yeah, like the grocery store, the local deli, the retail stockroom.
Because the statistics consistently show that catastrophic injuries happen in environments that just feel safe.
So what are some examples of that?
Well, a teenager working at a deli counter is strictly prohibited from operating a power-driven meat slicer.
Not allowed at all.
Completely banned. They cannot operate commercial bakery mixers either.
Okay.
And they are banned from using those massive cardboard ballers and compactors.
Oh, the ones located in the receiving areas of almost every large retail store or grocery chain.
Exactly. Those are incredibly dangerous.
Let's focus on that for a second. Put yourself in the shoes of a listener who's 16, working a Friday night shift at a big box store.
Right. A totally normal scenario.
The store is slammed. A massive shipment just arrived. There are broken down boxes everywhere.
Pure chaos in the back room.
Exactly. And the shift manager, who, by the way, might only be 19 or 20 themselves.
Right. They aren't that much older.
They tell you to just quickly toss the cardboard into the compactor and cycle the machine.
It happens all the time.
And as a teenager, you are at the literal bottom of the workplace hierarchy.
You have zero leverage.
You want to prove you are a good worker. It feels almost impossible to look your manager in the eye and be like, actually, according to the Fair Labor Standards Act, I can't do that.
No teenager saying that. The power dynamic makes it deeply, deeply uncomfortable to refuse a direct order.
Especially when the machinery looks so simple.
Right. It's just a button. You aren't climbing inside the compactor.
But the regulations exist because these specific machines cause horrifying accidents.
They really do. The sources we're analyzing highlight this devastating case in Iowa.
Oh yeah, the utility vehicle case.
Yeah. A 17-year-old was actually crushed to death by a utility vehicle while performing prohibited tasks unsupervised.
It's just tragic.
It is, because this machinery operates with immense force and literally zero margin for error.
Which brings us back to that 283% spike in child labor violations we talked about at the start.
It connects directly to that bigger picture.
If these machines are so dangerous, and the laws have been on the books since 1938, Why are violations suddenly skyrocketing right now?
That's the big question.
Are managers just becoming more malicious?
Not necessarily. It is a convergence of systemic failures rather than like individual malice.
Okay, so what's the primary driver?
It's a widespread labor shortage.
Right.
As adults age out of the workforce or they transition to different, better paying sectors, businesses are just desperate for frontline labor.
And teenagers are filling those vacuums.
Exactly. Combine that desperation with an astonishing lack of federal oversight.
Let's talk about the oversight, because the data on this is shocking.
It really is. The current data shows there is roughly one federal labor inspector for every 202,000 workers in the United States.
Wait, one inspector for over 200,000 workers?
Yes.
That means the threat of an unannounced federal audit is basically a statistical zero.
Precisely. The Department of Labor isn't going to randomly walk into a suburban fast food franchise on a Tuesday night to check if a minor is using the fryer correctly.
They just don't have the manpower.
No. The enforcement mechanism is entirely reactive.
Meaning they only show up after something goes wrong.
Right. Usually only triggering after a formal complaint is filed or, horribly, an injury occurs.
And what's the third variable driving this spike?
The workers themselves.
The teenagers.
Yeah. The vast majority of teenagers do not know the 17 hazardous occupations.
I certainly didn't when I was 16.
Right. They do not realize they have a federally protected right to refuse to operate a cardboard baler without facing termination.
They just assume the boss is allowed to tell them what to do.
Exactly.
Okay, before we move off federal regulations, we have to look at this massive blind spot our sources point out.
The agricultural exemption.
Yes. The rules for farm labor are entirely different from the rest of the economy.
They are almost unrecognizable compared to retail or industrial rules.
Like, a 12-year-old can legally work on a farm with just written parental consent.
A 12-year-old.
Yeah, and we just said a 16-year-old in a grocery store cannot use a meat slicer.
Right.
But a 16-year-old on a farm is legally permitted to operate a heavy tractor with over 20 PTO horsepower.
It's a stark double standard.
Why does this exist?
Well, it is a legacy policy. It's deeply, deeply embedded in the history of American family farming.
So back in the 30s again.
Right. When the FLSA was drafted, agrarian lobbying ensured that children working in agriculture were exempted from many of the core protections.
The protections that apply to, like, industrial or retail work.
Exactly. And despite extensive advocacy from modern labor groups pushing for legislation like the CARE Act.
What would the CARE Act do?
It would basically elevate agricultural safety standards to match other industries.
But it hasn't passed.
No, the disparity remains the law of the land.
So it creates a reality where the safety of a young worker depends entirely on the industry they happen to be employed in.
Exactly. The rules change completely just based on whether you're standing in a field or a factory.
Okay, so with the federal enforcement stretched incredibly thin, as we discussed, the states are stepping into the void.
And they are certainly making moves.
But they are not unifying around a single solution. We are watching this volatile state-level tug-of-war.
It's intense.
Some states are aggressively rewriting their codes to roll back child labor protections, while others are passing unprecedented new restrictions.
Right. The state legislative floors have really become the primary battleground for all of this.
Because lawmakers are attempting to solve local economic crises.
Specifically, the frontline labor shortages we talked about.
Right. So let's examine the rollback strategies first, because they really demonstrate how quickly this landscape is altering.
Okay, let's get into it.
And we should explicitly note here that the sources point out these rollbacks are largely moving through Republican-led legislatures.
Yes, sometimes aligning with broader conservative frameworks like Project 2025.
Which explicitly aims to reduce federal regulatory standards.
Right. And conversely, the protective expansions are primarily driven by other administrations.
Exactly. But to be totally clear, we're taking no political sides here. We're just looking at the mechanics of the laws that a young worker has to navigate today.
Because the mechanics of these rollbacks directly alter what a teenager can do on a daily basis, regardless of the politics behind them.
Absolutely. So what's happening in Iowa?
Iowa passed Senate File 542, which fundamentally expanded the scope of allowable work.
How so?
It permits 15-year-olds to perform light assembly line work.
Wow.
And to load and unload goods weighing up to 50 pounds.
A 15-year-old doing heavy lifting on an assembly line.
Yes. And crucially, the legislation also reduced the state-level financial penalties levied against employers who are caught violating child labor laws.
So they lowered the fines for breaking the rules.
Correct.
Okay, what about Indiana?
Indiana took more of a structural approach. They passed legislation that eliminated the state registry used to track employers who hired minors.
Wait, they just got rid of the list?
They essentially erased the administrative paper trail. Yeah.
That's a huge shift in oversight.
It is. Furthermore, they adjusted their codes to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work adult hours without requiring any formal parental permission.
So a parent doesn't even have to sign off on their kid working crazy hours anymore.
Not in Indiana.
Wow. And then Nebraska, the sources mentioned a wage issue there.
Yeah, Nebraska introduced a deeply controversial economic mechanism, a youth subminimum wage.
A youth subminimum wage.
Yes. Under LB 258, employers are permitted to pay 14 and 15-year-olds $13.50 an hour.
Which sits deliberately below the state's standard $15 minimum wage.
Exactly.
What is the justification for that?
Well, an economic theory presented by business advocates is that a lower wage offsets the cost of training inexperienced young workers.
Okay, like it's a training period?
Right, and they argue it incentivizes businesses to hire teenagers in the first place.
But labor advocates push back on that, right?
Strongly. They counter that it is simply codified wage discrimination.
Letting companies pay someone less just because of their age.
Exactly. They argue it allows corporations to displace adult workers with cheaper teenage labor.
Which is a massive concern. Okay, and what about West Virginia?
West Virginia went after the safety regulations directly.
The HOs we talked about.
Yeah. They passed a bill eliminating the state's specific list of hazardous occupations for workers under 18.
So they just wiped out their own state-level safety list.
Our sources indicate this policy effectively places 16 and 17-year-olds in direct competition with adults for industrial or physical jobs.
Jobs that were previously deemed way too dangerous for minors. Okay, so while those jurisdictions are loosening their frameworks, other states are essentially building defensive walls.
Very high walls, yes.
Illinois, for example. They passed Senate Bill 3646.
Which aggressively modernized their protections.
What did they do?
They introduced a requirement that a school officer must explicitly verify that a proposed job will not be detrimental to a minor's health or academic progress.
Before they even get the job.
Before a work permit is
Right.
even issued, yes.
That's a huge barrier, but a very protective one.
Exactly. They also implemented these really practical, common sense restrictions.
Like what?
Prohibiting 14 and 15-year-olds working in retail from personally handling products they are not legally permitted to purchase.
Oh, like alcohol or tobacco.
Exactly. If you can't buy it, you shouldn't be handling it at the register.
That makes total sense. And Colorado did something similar, right?
Yeah, Colorado instituted categorical bans. They prohibited minors from working in marijuana dispensaries or retail liquor stores entirely.
Which seems logical.
And they simultaneously extended the time frame. Employers must retain records on minor employees to 3 years.
Increasing the paper trail, the exact opposite of Indiana.
Precisely.
But Oregon implemented perhaps the most strategic legislative maneuver of all of them.
I agree. It's very clever legally.
They passed a law that directly enshrines the federal FLSA hours into their state code.
They basically copy-pasted the federal floor and made it their state floor.
Why do that if the federal law already exists?
Oregon created a legislative failsafe.
The failsafe.
Yeah. By locking the federal standards into state law, they ensure that if the federal government, perhaps under a new administration, were to weaken the FLSA hour restrictions at a national level,
then Oregon teenagers would still remain shielded.
Exactly. The federal floor might drop, but Oregon's state floor would hold firm.
That's fascinating. But let's think about the practical reality of this entire patchwork system.
It gets really messy.
Think about a listener who lives near a state border.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine you live in Illinois with its strict new protections, school officers checking your permit, all of that.
Right?
But you commute 10 miles across the border to work at a distribution center in a state that just rolled back its laws.
Like Iowa or Indiana.
Exactly. The moment you cross that physical line, your rights, your legal hours, and potentially your wage change entirely.
That's exactly how it works. Your labor rights are dictated by the jurisdiction where the work is physically performed.
Not where your permanent residence is located.
Nope, not where you sleep, but where you clock in.
That is wild.
A 10-mile commute can mean the difference between needing a school officer's permission to work and being legally allowed to load 50-pound boxes on an assembly line.
It requires incredible vigilance from young workers. You have to understand the specific local codes governing your employer's actual physical address.
You really do.
But, the entire concept of physical jurisdiction falls apart completely when you look at how money is actually being made today.
Oh, absolutely. The digital shift.
Right. What if your job doesn't have a physical address at all?
Like remote work or content creation.
Yeah. What if you aren't crossing a state line, but you're just turning on a ring light and hitting record in your bedroom?
The creator economy has completely, totally bypassed the 1938 FLSA.
They aren't even speaking the same language.
The law is struggling immensely to conceptualize the gig economy and digital content creation.
Because the definitions don't fit.
Right. The traditional definitions of employer, employee, workplace, and hours, they simply do not map onto a teenager vlogging or doing freelance digital work.
So let's look at the platform infrastructure itself.
Let's do it.
If you want to monetize content on YouTube through AdSense or participate in the TikTok Creator Rewards program.
Or even sell digital services on a freelance marketplace like Fiverr.
Right. Their terms of service all have a hard, strict barrier.
You must be 18 years old to register for the financial accounts.
Why are the tech companies so strict about that?
Well, the platforms enforce this primarily because of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act.
COPO.
Yes. And also just fundamental contract law, which dictates that a minor lacks the legal capacity to enter into a binding financial agreement.
So a 16-year-old literally cannot sign a contract with Google.
Exactly. Consequently, the parents must act as the legal proxies.
The parents have to step in.
The parents set up the banking details, they provide their social security numbers for the tax forms.
And as a result,
They possess total, unregulated legal control over the revenue generated by the minor's content or labor.
and history is flashing giant neon warning signs about what happens when parents have unregulated access to a child's massive earnings.
It never ends well.
Our sources point us directly to a crisis from 1939.
The Jackie Coogan case.
Yes. Tell us who Jackie Coogan is, because it's the foundational case study for all of this.
Jackie Coogan was arguably the most famous child star of the silent film era. He was actually discovered by Charlie Chaplin.
Okay, so massive celebrity.
Huge. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, he generated earnings equivalent to roughly $50 million, adjusted for modern inflation.
$50 million as a child.
Yes. But when Coogan turned 21 and attempted to access his wealth,
He found out it was gone.
he discovered his mother and stepfather had squandered nearly all of it.
Wait, how was that even legal? Didn't he sue them?
He did. He took his own parents to court. But under the legal framework of the time, the earnings of a minor belonged entirely and legally to the parents.
So it wasn't even considered theft.
There was no theft in the eyes of the law. It was their money.
That is heartbreaking.
He recovered only a tiny fraction of his earnings. But the public outrage was so intense that California passed the Child Actors Bill.
Which became universally known as the Coogan Law.
Exactly.
How does the Coogan Law actually work to stop that from happening?
It mandated a structural financial block. A minimum of 15% of a child actor's gross earnings had to be deposited into a restricted trust account.
Okay, so the parents couldn't touch that 15%.
Right. The funds only unlocked when the child reached the age of majority.
The Coogan Law became like the gold standard for protecting minors in the traditional entertainment industry.
It did. If a teenager is cast in a television commercial or a feature film today, that trust framework guarantees they will see a portion of their earnings.
But there is a critical failure here.
A massive one.
The Coogan Law was explicitly designed for the Hollywood studio system.
Right. It requires traditional employment contracts, incorporated production companies, union oversight, and highly regulated working hours.
And absolutely none of those things exist for a family vlogging in their kitchen.
None of it.
Yeah.
We are watching the explosion of what people call sharenting.
Sharenting, yeah. And the rise of Kidfluencers.
Entire family economies are being built on broadcasting the daily lives of children to millions of subscribers.
And until very, very recently, these digital child stars had zero legal right to the massive wealth they were generating.
It's the Jackie Coogan situation all over again, just on YouTube.
What's fascinating here is the difference between a traditional child actor and a modern kidfluencer.
The psychological and operational differences are profound.
Like, a child actor travels to a designated set.
Right. They assume a fictional character, they work for a strictly defined number of hours monitored by a studio teacher.
And then they go home to their private life.
Exactly. But a kidfluencer's private life is the product.
Yes. Their developmental milestones, their family vacations, their emotional breakdowns.
It's all broadcast continuously.
The boundary between work and existence completely dissolves.
Think about it. If a parent hands a 5-year-old a new toy to unbox for a sponsored video, is the child working or are they just playing?
Right. The child likely has no concept that a camera is rolling or that millions of people will watch that interaction.
And because the parents serve simultaneously as the producers, directors, camera operators, and financial managers,
the structural potential for exploitation is unprecedented.
Totally unprecedented. But recognizing this void, Illinois actually pioneered a legislative response.
They enacted a digital Coogan law for vloggers.
Right. Yes. Which took effect in July 2024. And states like California and Minnesota have aggressively followed their lead with similar frameworks.
Let's look at the mechanics of these new laws, because how do you actually measure digital work?
It's tricky. But under the Illinois and California models, the trigger is screen time.
Screen time. Wait.
If a minor is featured in 30% or more of a family's monetized video content within a 30-day period, a financial mechanism activates.
30% of the videos.
Right, and then a percentage of the gross earnings must be legally diverted into a trust account.
That only the minor can access at age 18, just like the original Coogan law.
Exactly. In California, it can be up to 65% of a proportionate percentage based on that screen time.
So it's a really sophisticated attempt to map an analog law onto digital behavior.
It is. The legislation places the legal burden entirely on the parents, whom the law basically classifies as the vlogger.
So the parents have to do the math.
They are required to maintain meticulous logs of the minor's screen time and ensure the trust accounts are properly funded,
aiming to guarantee that the wealth generated by a child's likeness is preserved for their adulthood.
That's the goal.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Anytime you try to regulate new technology with legislation, you run into the limits of language.
The wording of the law is everything.
And the legal analysis in our sources points out a massive, almost unbelievable loophole in the Illinois statute.
It's a glaring oversight.
The text of the law specifically utilizes the phrases video content and blogs.
Right, video content.
So wait, what happens if a family is monetizing their child exclusively through sponsored still photography on Instagram or Facebook?
Well, based on the plain text reading of the statute, still photography is categorically excluded from protection.
You have to be kidding.
I'm serious. Courts interpret statutes based on the specific words passed by the legislature.
So by narrowly defining the medium as video content, the law creates a massive gap.
A huge gap. If a parent generates, say, $50,000 through a series of highly produced, sponsored Instagram photos featuring their toddler wearing a specific brand of clothing.
The current interpretation of the Illinois law suggests that money remains entirely unprotected.
Yep, completely accessible to the parents without any trust requirements.
It perfectly illustrates how legislative text just struggles to keep pace with digital monetization.
It's always playing catch-up.
But even if you aren't an influencer, right, even if you aren't generating millions of views or starring in sponsored content,
even if you're just running a quiet side hustle or working a local job,
there is a silent entity tracking every single transaction.
The ultimate boss.
And they always demand their share?
Yeah.
We have to talk about the IRS.
We do. The tax code is where a lot of young workers face a severe reality check.
Because there's this deeply ingrained cultural myth.
Oh, yeah. People think that because you are a minor or because you are still a dependent on your parents' tax return, your income is inherently exempt from taxation.
I think everyone assumes that at 16. You think, I'm a kid. The government isn't coming after my lawn mowing money.
It's a nice thought, but it's completely false.
The reality depends entirely on how the money is classified. Let's look at earned income first.
Okay.
This is standard W-2 employment. You clock in at a grocery store, they deduct taxes from your paycheck, and they send you a form in January.
Right. For a dependent child engaged in W-2 employment, the IRS rules for the 2025 and 2026 tax years are relatively straightforward.
Okay, what's the rule?
You are required to file a federal income tax return if your earned income exceeds the standard deduction for that year.
And what's the standard deduction number?
For 2025, it's $15,700, and it increases to $16,100 in 2026.
So if your part-time retail job pays you $10,000 for the year, you generally will not owe federal income tax.
Correct, though the sources astutely point out that you should probably file a return anyway.
Why file if you don't owe?
Because the employer likely withheld taxes from your paychecks throughout the year. Filing is the only way to get that money refunded to you.
Good tip. Get your money back. But W-2 income is the simple part.
It gets much messier.
What happens when a teenager bypasses traditional employment and starts a side hustle?
Like tutoring or walking dogs.
Yeah, or flipping vintage clothing on Depop.
That is classified as self-employment, and the financial landscape changes drastically.
Okay, so instead of a W-2, you or the platform you use will generate a 1099 NEC form.
Exactly. And the trap here is the filing threshold.
It's not the $16,000 standard deduction.
No. For self-employment income, you do not get to wait until you hit $16,000.
What's the number?
If you generate just $400 in net earnings from self-employment over the course of a calendar year, you trigger a legal requirement to file a tax return.
Wait, really? Just $400?
$400, and you have to pay self-employment tax.
That is practically nothing. You could hit $400 in a single weekend of intense online reselling.
Easily. And the self-employment tax rate is aggressive. It sits at 15.3%.
15.3%. Why is it so high?
Well, in a traditional W-2 job, your employer pays half of your Social Security and Medicare taxes, and you pay the other half.
Right.
But when you are self-employed, you are considered both the employer and the employee.
Oh, so you pay both halves.
Exactly. So the IRS demands the entire 15.3% directly from you.
Think about the psychological impact of that realization.
It's crushing for a teenager.
Imagine a high school student diligently saves $1,000 from freelance graphic design work they did on a platform like Upwork.
They think they have $1,000 in spending power.
Right. But the reality is they owe a minimum of $153 directly to the federal government for self-employment taxes.
And that's entirely separate from any federal or state income tax they might also owe depending on their total bracket.
It is a brutal introduction to the tax code.
It really is.
But the complexity deepens even more when we transition from money you work for to money that works for you.
Investment income.
Yeah. The IRS treats investments and passive income under a completely different framework, largely governed by something called the Kiddie Tax.
Right, the Kiddie Tax. This was implemented during the Tax Reform Act of 1986.
Why did they create it?
Well, prior to this, high net worth parents utilized a really simple tax avoidance strategy.
Because children were usually in the lowest possible tax bracket, right?
Exactly. So wealthy parents would simply transfer large portfolios of stock or income-generating assets into their child's name.
Oh, I see.
The investments would generate massive dividends or capital gains, but they would be taxed at the child's nominal rate rather than the parent's high marginal rate.
So the IRS closed that loophole by creating a tiered taxation system for a minor's unearned income.
Yes. Let's look at the mechanics for the 2026 tax year.
Okay, walk us through it.
The IRS says the first $3,350 of a child's unearned income is completely tax-free.
That's step one.
The next $3,350 is taxed at the child's specific tax rate, which is typically quite low, around 10%.
Okay, still not bad.
But the moment that unearned income crosses the $2,700 threshold,
a massive penalty kicks in.
everything above that $2,700 mark is taxed at the parent's highest marginal tax rate.
Wait, really?
Yes. Depending on the household income, that marginal rate could reach 37%.
So if a grandparent sets up a custodial brokerage account that performs exceptionally well,
Or if a teenager gets incredibly lucky day trading cryptocurrency.
those gains lose their tax advantage status very quickly.
Very quickly. Once they cross that threshold, the teenager is effectively paying the tax bill of a high-earning adult.
This brings us to a massive collision between the tax code and the creator economy.
It's a perfect storm.
We established earlier that platforms like YouTube require you to be 18 to hold an AdSense account.
Right, the contract issue.
Therefore, the parent sets up the account using their own Social Security number.
Yep.
In January, Google sends a 1099 form for, let's say, $50,000 in ad revenue directly to the parent.
Because the parent's SSN is on the account.
So the IRS computer system sees $50,000 of income attached to the parent.
Right.
Does the parent have to pay their 37% marginal tax rate on the teenager's YouTube money?
If the family does not actively manage the classification, yes.
Oh, wow.
The IRS assumes the income belongs to the individual listed on the 1099.
But the tax code provides a specific mechanical solution for misclassified income.
It does. It's detailed in our sources as the Nominee 1099 process.
This process is essential for any family navigating digital monetization.
It is the most important administrative step you can take.
How does a Nominee 1099 actually function? I like to think of it like a financial relay race.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it.
So the parent receives the initial 1099 from Google. They're handed the baton.
Right. When the parent files their own personal tax return, they report the $50,000 as income.
Okay.
But on the very next line, they deduct the exact same $50,000 amount, coding it specifically as nominee income.
This signals to the IRS that while the parent received the funds, they are not the ultimate beneficiary.
Exactly. They hold the baton for a second, declare they don't own it, and prepare to hand it off.
And how do they hand it off?
The parent then acts as the issuer. They generate a brand new 1099 NEC form for the $50,000 and issue it directly to their teenager using the teenager's Social Security number.
The parent steps off the track, entirely removing the income from their high-bracket tax return.
Precisely. The teenager now reports the income on their own tax return.
The tax savings there are astronomical.
Massive. The teenager will still owe the 15.3% self-employment tax on that money, but their federal income tax rate on the remainder will be vastly lower than the parent's 37% rate.
Executing that one piece of administrative paperwork can preserve thousands of dollars of the child's earnings.
But it requires intense proactive management.
You really have to be on top of it.
The overarching theme for young workers managing self-employment or 1099 income is that they must operate like a formalized business entity from day one.
Treating your side hustle like a real business is the ultimate cheat code to adulting.
It really is. You have to track your deductible expenses, the cost of the camera, the software subscriptions, the internet bandwidth.
Because those expenses reduce your net profit and lower your total tax liability.
Exactly. And you must cultivate the discipline of immediately segregating 20 to 30% of your gross earnings into a separate account specifically designated for taxes.
Because April comes fast.
Yeah.
And you do not want to be caught empty-handed.
No, you do not.
Okay, so knowing the traps in the tax code and the state laws is only half the battle.
Right.
The other half is understanding the pathways to actually acquiring a job and structuring it favorably in the first place.
Let's look at the actionable frameworks a young worker can use to navigate this system.
The approach relies heavily on the age of the worker, obviously.
As we established, a 13-year-old looking for income is entirely restricted to the informal economy.
So no W-2s. But they can legally offer tutoring services to younger students.
They can walk dogs, or they can operate a digital resale business with their parents managing the marketplace accounts.
And the sources emphasize that these informal side hustles are frequently more lucrative than traditional employment anyway.
Much more lucrative, often. A teen offering specialized math tutoring or effectively sourcing and flipping vintage apparel can often clear $15 to $40 an hour.
Which vastly exceeds the federal minimum wage of $7.25.
Because they are leveraging a specific skill rather than simply trading hours for dollars.
But what happens when a teenager turns 14 and decides they actually want the structure of a W-2 job at a corporate retail chain?
Like a structured schedule and a steady paycheck.
Yeah, what is the actual mechanism for getting hired at that age?
The hiring process for a minor involves creating a highly specific paper trail.
The working papers.
Exactly. While the federal FLSA does not explicitly require work permits, a significant number of states mandate the issuance of employment certificates.
Working papers.
Yeah. In jurisdictions like New York or California, an employer cannot legally allow a minor to begin training or clock in without this documentation securely on file.
The process of acquiring working papers is not just a quick formality either.
No, it takes time.
A teenager usually has to coordinate with their high school guidance counselor or the State Department of Labor.
They have to provide certified proof of age, secure, formal, written consent from a parent or guardian.
And in some jurisdictions, they must even undergo a medical examination.
Right, to produce a doctor's note certifying they are physically fit to perform the anticipated duties.
So if a teenager is planning to secure a summer job, they need to initiate this administrative process weeks before they actually submit an application.
Do not wait until you get the job offer to figure out your working papers.
Absolutely. Now, there is also a highly specialized, federally recognized structural advantage for teenagers whose parents are business owners.
Oh, this is a massive cheat code.
The FLSA contains a specific carve-out. If a business is entirely owned by the parents of the minor, the federal age and hour restrictions are effectively waived.
A parent can legally employ their own child at any age, provided the duties do not involve mining, manufacturing, or any of those 17 hazardous occupations.
So you still can't have your kid running the cardboard baler?
No, safety rules still apply, but the operational flexibility for hours is great.
And the tax mechanics of this carve-out are unbelievable.
They really are. The sources break down the specific IRS rules regarding parent-owned businesses.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the parent's business is legally structured as a sole proprietorship or a partnership exclusively between the two parents,
Okay.
and they hire their child who is under the age of 18, the wages paid to that child are entirely exempt from FICA taxes.
Wait, really? Entirely exempt.
Yes. That means neither the business nor the child has to pay the standard Social Security and Medicare taxes on those wages.
That's a huge saving.
Furthermore, the wages are exempt from FUTA, the federal unemployment tax.
Let's run a hypothetical to see how powerful this is, just so the listener can visualize it.
Okay, perfect.
Imagine a family owns a local restaurant, structured as a sole proprietorship.
Okay.
They hire their 16-year-old to manage the restaurant's social media accounts, photograph the food, and handle online community engagement.
A very common scenario today.
Right. And the parents pay the teenager $15,000 for the year.
Okay, let's do the math.
Because that $15,000 falls below the $16,100 standard deduction for 2026, the teenager owes zero federal income tax.
Correct.
And because of the parental exemption, neither side owes FICA or FUTA taxes.
Also correct.
And the parent's business gets to deduct that $15,000 as a legitimate payroll expense, lowering their own business tax liability.
It is one of the most efficient wealth transfer mechanisms available in the tax code.
It's essentially moving $15,000 from a high tax bracket to a 0% tax bracket, completely legally.
Yes. However, the IRS enforces strict compliance parameters, obviously.
They don't just let you make things up.
No. The work performed by the minor must be legitimate, documented, and necessary for the business.
You cannot simply put a toddler on the payroll to claim a deduction.
Exactly. The wages paid must be reasonable for the market rate of the tasks performed.
And crucially, this exemption completely dissolves if the parent's business is structured differently.
Yes. If the business is an S corporation or a C corporation, the exemption is gone. It only applies to sole proprietorships and spousal partnerships.
So the difference between paying thousands in taxes and paying nothing comes down entirely to how the corporate entity is filed.
It all comes back to understanding the structural details.
So as a young worker, what are the daily practical protocols they should implement to protect their time and their earnings?
We need to deliver some actionable takeaways here.
Let's do a rapid-fire myth-busting session first.
Let's do it.
Can I work past 7 p.m. on a Tuesday if I'm 15?
Federal law says no, unless it's between June 1st and Labor Day.
Can I use the deli meat slicer if I'm really, really careful?
Absolutely not. It is a federally prohibited hazardous occupation.
Okay, so what is the most immediate defensive protocol a teenager can take?
Independent documentation.
Meaning?
A minor should never rely exclusively on an employer's digital scheduling software or punch clock.
They should track it themselves.
They must maintain a personal contemporaneous log of their hours. Use a digital note on your phone to record the exact minute a shift begins, the precise duration of any mandated breaks, and the exact minute you clock out.
Why is that so important?
Because if a wage dispute arises, or if an employer systematically alters time cards to avoid overtime or hours violations,
Which definitely happens.
that personal log becomes the foundational evidence for a Labor Department claim.
That's a great habit to build. You also have to know the specific economic floor of your jurisdiction.
Check your state Labor Department website to confirm the exact minimum wage.
Do not assume the federal $7.25 series applies if you live in a state that mandates $15.
Right. And you need to verify if your state allows for a youth subminimum wage or a lower training wage for your first 90 days.
You have to know what your time is legally worth.
And finally, communication is the final protocol.
Setting boundaries.
A young worker must proactively manage their boundaries with management. They should provide their employer with a physical, written document outlining their legal availability based on their age bracket and state laws.
Stating clearly, like, I am 15, my state requires me to clock out by 7 p.m. on school nights, and I cannot exceed 18 hours a week.
Doing that removes the ambiguity. Establishing that legal boundary during the onboarding process prevents the systemic pressure to violate laws during a busy shift.
It's so much harder for a manager to bully you into staying late if you handed them a piece of paper on day one stating your legal limit.
Exactly.
So to synthesize this massive landscape we have covered today,
It's a lot to take in.
the framework governing youth employment is fundamentally unstable right now.
It's shifting constantly.
The federal safety net constructed in 1938 is technically intact, but it is deeply compromised by an acute lack of enforcement personnel.
State legislatures are actively pulling the regulatory floor in opposite directions.
Right, responding to localized economic pressures by either eroding protections or fortifying them.
And layered over all of this is a digital economy that operates entirely outside the boundaries of geography and traditional corporate structures.
The complexity demands operational literacy from young workers.
It really does. Whether you are analyzing a state code to understand your legal curfew, refusing to operate a prohibited piece of heavy machinery in a retail stockroom, or executing a nominee a 1099 transfer to protect your digital revenue.
Understanding the underlying mechanisms of these laws is the only way to assert control over your physical safety and your financial future.
Knowledge is power here, truly.
And as we consider the future of young workers navigating this digital landscape, I want to leave you with one final, deeply philosophical concept drawn directly from our sources.
This is a really profound point.
We discussed the digital trust accounts established by California's Senate Bill 764.
Right, the new Coogan laws.
But that legislation actually included a secondary mechanism, a right to delete provision for Kidfluencers.
The right to delete?
Yeah, the provision grants individuals, upon reaching the age of 18, the legal authority to request the permanent total removal of any video content featuring their likeness that was monetized by their parents during their childhood.
The platforms are required to comply and completely erase the digital footprint.
That concept forces us to ask a really profound question.
It does.
If your entire developmental process, your most vulnerable moments, your childhood routines was packaged, broadcast, and monetized without your capacity to consent.
What does it mean for your identity when you suddenly acquire the legal power to erase your own history from the public record?
How will our legal systems and our culture adapt to a generation that demands the absolute right to be forgotten?
It challenges our fundamental understanding of privacy, digital permanence, and the ownership of memory.
It really does. Thank you for spending your time with us on this deep dive into the rulebook.
It was a fascinating discussion.
I encourage you to reflect on one specific mechanism we discussed today, whether it's checking your state's specific minimum wage, calculating your potential 1099 tax liability, or simply starting a personal log of your hours.
Just take one small step.
And use that knowledge to secure your own time and money. Stay
Yeah.
curious, stay informed, and we will see you next time.